What did they do? They figured out that the source of their the power of the other side is to be able to come, show up, and destroy the possibility of the clinic operating, and they took that power away from them. I'll give you an example, a small example of somebody that I was working with. He was a small business owner, and this business owner was in a weak position relative to his top salesperson. And the reason was that this salesperson was rude and obnoxious and kept squeezing him for higher commissions and higher salary. And this business owner couldn't help but saying yes just about every time. And the reason he couldn't help saying yes was because he knew that if this top salesperson in this industry left his company and went to a competitor, he would take most of his business with him. And so he was just so frustrated, not even because of the economics, but because of the emotional toll this was taking on him, that he kept squeezing. He was rude to people in the office, and he couldn't do anything about it. And I said, listen, you probably can't do anything about it right now, but you can do something about it in 3 months. And here's what you need to do between now and 3 months. Call up all of your top clients and start building relationships with them. Most of them don't even know your name. They know your company's name, but they don't know you. Because what some salespeople do, I mean, think about it. If you have a salesperson and they're going to clients, they can sell one of 3 things. They can sell your brand, they can sell your product, or they can sell themselves. Who does your customer trust? Your brand, the quality of your product, or the salesperson? And in a lot of small businesses, this is a huge problem because the salespeople control the client. And I said, that's the source of his power. That's why he can tell you to do what he wants and squeeze you for money and emotionally. And so what he did over the next maybe 6 months was start building relationships with these clients and took away the threat that this employee had of taking business away and was able to put him in his place. And things have changed drastically. He hasn't fired him, but the relationship is great. Okay. I've practiced martial arts a bit, and one of the things that you learn early, at least in the martial arts that I studied, is that when there's somebody bigger or stronger than you and they punch you, you don't want to try to block the punch. All right? If they're bigger and stronger than you, one of these moves might not be the most effective because you'll still get hurt. What you want to do, and the line my instructor often used to say is, the best block is don't be there. All right? The best way to block a punch is to not be where it's landing. All right? And let me give you an example of what that means in this situation. I had an executive student of mine who told me this story. He was in the construction business, and he was negotiating with a buyer of some commercial property that he was developing, and they negotiated for many months, and the deal closed, or was about to close, and the contract was almost signed when the buyer says to him, actually, I have this last-minute concern. What I would like to introduce into this contract is a penalty for late development, and he introduced a penalty that was just tremendous, a huge penalty clause. Now, there was already a default penalty clause, but he was just beefing it up immensely. And the CEO of this construction company was very upset. He was surprised and he was angry that here we are at the eve of signing the deal. He knows I'm not going to back away now, and he thinks he can get whatever he wants. And in fact, he's probably right. He can get whatever he wants because I'm desperate. I need this deal now. I've invested too much. So he thought about his options. Well, I could walk away. Well, that's no good. I could just accept the deal as it is and swallow it, which, you know, maybe I can do that. Or I can try to haggle it down, at least reduce the amount of penalty that the person is trying to charge me. And then he came up with a fourth idea, the one he actually went with, which is a lot like this notion of not trying to block their punch. He says to him, I accept everything you've said. In fact, I'm willing to pay you an even higher penalty than the one you've suggested. But if I develop this early, you will give me more money. What he had done was, instead of getting upset that somebody's making a demand of him at the last second and being angry that he's been taken for a ride, he said, let's step back and analyze. What does this person's request tell me about their needs? Other than maybe it's not the right time to bring it up, it does tell me one thing. They really care about timely completion of the project. If that's true and I can deliver it, maybe I can monetize it. And let's not just focus on the left side, let's focus on the whole spectrum. I will give you more than what you want, and then you'll give me something in return. And the other side agreed, and they were both better off because he knew he could complete early or at least on time, and the other sides had risk that was mitigated because of this clause. Finally, if you have no power, maybe you don't want to play the power game. Let me tell you an example. Again, I'm going to go to the early 1900s, as I like to go, with not a political example, but an example about Albert Einstein, who some people consider to be a pretty smart guy. Einstein was being courted by Princeton University, and he was asked to name his price, essentially. And Einstein sent a letter to Princeton University, and the letter said something along the lines of, thank you for the offer, I'd be happy to accept. I would like $3,000 a year, unless you think I can get by with less. Okay, I'm sure nobody has ever sent in an offer like this when they were asked how much they want to be paid by their employer, but Einstein decided to send a letter that said that, and the response from Princeton came as follows. That's great, we're happy to have you, and we will pay you $15,000 a year. Now the question is, why would Princeton pay $15,000 a year? There's lots of reasons, but let's consider a couple very quickly. One, it's possible that Einstein doesn't know what he's worth. Sitting in Europe, maybe he doesn't know what the going rate is. And there's an old adage, time reveals truth. Maybe they can take him for a ride now, but when he comes to the US and he discovers what other universities tend to pay, he might discover that he's been given a bad deal. So that's one strategic reason. But there's another reason. By behaving this way, imagine what happens if maybe a few years later, Harvard or MIT or Stanford or someone else decides to try to woo Einstein away and offers $20,000, $22,000. And the most Princeton can pay is $18,000. What's Einstein going to do then? He's much more likely to stay, because what they've done is they've changed the game. We don't haggle with people that we care about and with whom we have a relationship. We deal with each other fairly. And by giving a little bit more up front, they've built relationship points. They've bought trust in a way that's very hard to do typically in a haggling situation, right? So one of the things you don't want to be doing is always playing the power game. There's other games to play. You know, sometimes we tell our students, if you have an offer from an employer, it's your only offer and it's pretty obvious to everybody that you're in a weak position, accept the offer and then negotiate. All right? And I've actually personally done that myself in many years ago when I was actually looking for a real job. You know, you can try to haggle and pretend that you have a lot of strength, or you can say, listen, I love this company. This is exactly what I want to be doing. I'm going to accept regardless, but can I tell you some of the needs and concerns that I have, and can you see if you can meet any of those? That would be really greatly appreciated. Sometimes that's the right play. Okay, final example before I end to leave you with. I believe there are Subway sandwich shops in India, right? Okay, so this is something that took place at a Subway sandwich shop in the US some years ago. It was in the newspaper. Fascinating. Man walks in and orders a sandwich. Then he takes out a gun and points it at the cashier. Give me all the money that is in the cash register is the demand by the armed robber. The cashier responds, how about $10 and the sandwich? They eventually agree on $20 and the sandwich. Now, I know this is being taped. Let me assure you that I am not suggesting that if somebody pulls out a gun, you negotiate with them, give them whatever they want. The cashier was an idiot. But, having said that, let's consider some of the analytics of the situation. If you're the cashier, you're in a bad situation. There is a gun to your head. You can't be in a weaker position than that, unless you have the insight or the stupidity to discover what's the other side's alternatives. Is he really going to shoot me? Is he really going to go to jail for the rest of his life for a couple $100? Is this threat really credible? Or is his alternative to just get away from the police? Your position is really bad until you've really considered the position of the other side. And, I mean, if the other guy's crazy, you're dead anyway, but, you know, so things work out. So the idea, of course, here, there's an old saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the argument I'd like to make is that trained negotiators and stupid cashiers don't have to worry so much. And that's the idea. That being in a weak position is not great by any stretch of the imagination. And nothing I'm going to say here, or if we spend another couple hours on it, is going to change, you know, miraculously all of your troubles. But what you can do is believe that there are things that you can do even when you're weak,